right? And I know people always say failure is a necessary step to success, but they don't caveat it correctly in my view. Failure sucks. It hurts. And like when you fail, it is not easy, and it sometimes lasts longer than you want. So like I don't ever want people to think about failure in like some like, inspirational way. But the truth is, if you believe that you will never settle for failure, then failure doesn't become as scary. It doesn't feel like it's going to be there forever. And then you can continue to try new things, innovate. And like, even in the last 5 years for my business and my brand as a whole, like it's just about experimenting and then leaning in and just believing that whatever I fail in, I'll learn from it and keep going. And that's kind of where this whole journey's taken me.
Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today we have the absolute pleasure to interview Brian Fanzo, and we'll be talking about his transition from Web2 to Web3 and everything he has learned about branding and building a community. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I would like to start with your background, and I know that you grew up in Pittsburgh, US. And I would like to learn a bit more about your upbringing and how did that shape you as an individual, and what were the most important lessons that you learned as a kid and you implemented later on in life?
Yeah, no, happy to start there. For me, born and raised in Pittsburgh, grew up in Virginia Beach, like through middle school and high school. And for me, like I was very blessed. I'm the oldest of three boys. My dad being an entrepreneur. And for me, like I grew up at school, very sports, hockey, baseball were kind of my main sports. Not great at school early on. It was a big struggle for me. If we fast forward, I was diagnosed ADHD at 31 years old. And if I could go back, that was, one of the big glaring pieces for me was I was always the kid that raised his hand and knew all the answers, yet I would fail the tests. Thankfully got into college to play hockey and went in with like the business information computer science focus. And I kind of quickly learned through like high school and college that like I wasn't going to be the smartest, I wasn't going to be the greatest athlete, but I was going to be the one that could think differently and would be the one that was kind of the team player in the bridge. And I was in a fraternity, I played college hockey, and I was a computer science major, and no one was really ever like that. It was a very unique crossover, and so that became just like kind of my natural piece. And then after college, couldn't get a job in tech after college, so I worked at UPS just delivering packages, and happened to be in line at a grocery store getting milk, and someone recognized my fraternity letters, asked me what I did, and said, could I get a security clearance? And I said yes, and the next day did an interview and got a job offer with a security clearance in cybersecurity. And I had never taken a course in cybersecurity. I, of course, had a tech background. And for context, this is also 2004. 2005. So cybersecurity wasn't even really a thing. Like it was so new in the government world. But one could say that's where it all began. And then from there, I ended up being, in cybersecurity for 10 years, took on a large team, working with over 100 employees, deploying tech across the world, traveled 54 countries in 4 years, deploying cybersecurity tools. But yeah, that's kind of the origin and the root. And the interesting part of it, I guess the thread is, I realized that my superpower is translating the geek speak around technology. And it goes back into my days of high school and college where I was the translator and the connector. And technically that's the same thing I do now, in my 40s, just being that translator of tech and leaning in on crypto and Web3 and meme coins. A lot of that is just helping people tell the story and kind of bridge the gap between technology.
And you mentioned that you were very sporty from a very young age, and I can relate to it. And I've learned some of the most important lessons in my life through sports. Could you just outline the essential skills that you acquired at like these sports clubs, and how did they help you become the individual that you are today?
Yeah, I love that question. Also, I have 3 daughters now that are in high school, middle school, and elementary, and we're very sports on that side as well. Also, being born in Pittsburgh, like it is the only thing. Like we bleed Pittsburgh sports, black and yellow, everything. When we moved from Pittsburgh to Virginia Beach, I was shocked that not everyone wore the team colors to church, because in Pittsburgh, my mom wore her Steeler earrings. It was Sunday ritual, right? Like it was, so like I being born in Pittsburgh is like, you like bleed it. And my family still has season tickets for the Steelers. My daughters are addicted to all Pittsburgh sports, but I think playing sports also, right? It's the idea of like teamwork. It's understanding, your own commitment, what could push you. And I also think just the idea of being competitive, learning how to lose, learning how to win. I think a lot of those things are kind of those key, components of it. And I also just think learning how to work and kind of interact with different personalities, people from a different backgrounds. Even like I played hockey in very young age in Virginia Beach, which was not not a lot of people played hockey, but then I played baseball on the state team. And so I would be able to connect with people that were just different worlds of my, kind of life. And I think that helps you throughout life, right? And I think not only are sports important from that side, but it also kind of helps you find like what are the things you're great at. Like I realized quickly that I could be a leader. I could be someone that kept people motivated, even if I wasn't the best player. And I like one of my pride things, which might sound funny, is that like I was the assistant captain of our college hockey team my senior year, but I was a third line player. So I was looked at by the team as the leader, but I was third line talent. Like it's just the truth. Like I wasn't tall enough, wasn't fast enough. But like if you look at that in life, like it doesn't mean that you can't lead from where you're at. And I think those are some of the key aspects that matter the most to me, for sure.
I love this. And you mentioned that you've been to so many cities, and I think in our initial conversation before we started recording, you said 76, but I'm not 100% sure on the number. Is
Yeah,
that
76 countries. So I've been to 76 countries. Yeah. So
okay? Yeah.
yep.
Even
Yeah, around the world. So yeah, my goal is 100 before I turn 50. So that's the goal.
that's good. That's really good. But my question was around the favorite city and what made you rethink how you connect with people, especially in this digital age, because I meet so many people online and I have some amazing friends that I communicate with via Telegram and other social media channels, but we have never met in person. So I would really want to know, what was this city where you went to and everyone was so connected that you appreciate the value of meeting people in real life?
Well, that's a good one. So I think the context is like my first country I went to was Korea, and I was blown away. I really loved Korea, like in that context. But then, working for the government, I made many trips to the Middle East. I've been to every country in the Middle East. 3 trips to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan, 12 trips to Kuwait, 8 trips to Dubai. And like Middle East as a region was the place I fell in love with. And it was the one that I was so excited to come back and tell people about, because especially if you think about the time, it was 2006 to 2015, where I think like our view and impression of the Middle East was so different than what I experienced, like from like the people. And I just enjoy like the culture and what I was able to kind of find out there. But if I had to pick like a favorite city or a favorite area, like I've loved Australia. Like I feel like Australians are really well connected. They have like their own vibe and energy, kind of about them. But I always tell people my favorite, Copenhagen in Denmark was my favorite of all the places I've been to. I thought they were tech forward, but understood being energy efficient, and everyone's on bikes, and it had just a very community feel. So I felt like Copenhagen would probably be the place that was my favorite of all of the cities that I've been to. But no doubt, like the Middle East region and Australia were also up there as my favorites.
Nice. And I've read on an interview that you left your safe jobs in 2014 for something a bit more uncertain, and that's the first time that you decided to make this like big choice in your life of like, I don't want to be safe, I would rather do something that I love. Could you just tell me a bit more about this transition, but also what would you tell Brian that was this kid ages ago with your current mindset? What were like the main lessons that you've learned?
So for me, a lot of my life, like I look back, a lot of it was being like kind of impulsive, raising my hand, like when I got the government job, when they said, can someone fly to Korea on this upcoming Monday? And I raised my hand first, and he was like, okay, do you have a passport? And I was like, no, I don't even have a passport. I was like, but I think I can get a same-day passport. And I went and got a same-day passport. Spent 8 hours in Washington, D.C. And then that Monday, I flew to Korea. And on the way home, because I had done such a great job, the government lead in Korea said, hey, he should be the lead. He should take that role. And I got promoted 3 layers up from my entry level job for simply raising my hand. And then I studied like the whole flight there. I had the books out trying to learn what the heck I was supposed to be doing in this job that I just raised my hand for. And I think that like resembles a lot of my life and my career. And that moment that you were talking about was like that idea of like my government job, and it was coming to a point where our contract had changed and I was actually getting promoted. And I did make that decision of like, you know what, I don't know if I want to work in the government for the rest of my life. And I'm not sure if cybersecurity is the thing for me. And everyone around me, I mean, cybersecurity 2014 was taking off. Having a government, I had the highest civilian clearance that you could get in the U.S. government. So I had like kind of like that big piece. And so for me, it was just kind of like I knew myself enough. And I think that's probably the thing I should tell anything, like the more self-aware you become, it doesn't make life easier, let's be very clear, but it does allow you to make some decisions that from the outside would look like they're crazy, or they don't kind of map to where you want to go. And that's kind of what I did. And I left that, the clearance, the government job. And it was a scramble, right? Figuring out entrepreneurship and a lot of that stuff. But if I had to looking back, that's also when I got diagnosed ADHD. So I really quickly figured out like, wow, I'm not broken. I'm just really different. My brain operates different. The world wasn't built for me. And so I have to kind of show up differently. And so the thing I would probably tell myself back then is like, there will never be a clear path of where you're going. And that's okay. Like you can literally recognize the fact that the dots that maybe we were promised, right, when we were younger, of like, this is your career path. And if you go to school for this, you're going to get this. That was made up in an illusion. Even our parents didn't live that. They believed that might have been possible. And I think the beauty of it is having that entire journey of it. And, not being safe, comes with high risk, high reward, but also just the idea that like you only live one life. And I think for me, looking at it being like, the money I was making back then, like it's been hard to come close to the money I was making back then. Having this job security that I had in the government, that doesn't exist really anywhere. But the truth is, those things weren't on my pillars, the things that mattered the most to me. And I have no regrets in that realm, right? I have some regrets along the way of things some decisions I might have made. But for me, like, taking that high risk and understanding and like believing in myself, like at the end of the day, the thing I know more than anything is that I will fail, right? And I know people always say failure is a necessary step to success, but they don't caveat it correctly in my view. Failure sucks. It hurts. And like when you fail, it is not easy, and it sometimes lasts longer than you want. So like I don't ever want people to think about failure in like some like, inspirational way. But the truth is, if you believe that you will never settle for failure, then failure doesn't become as scary. It doesn't feel like it's going to be there forever. And then you can continue to try new things, innovate. And like, even in the last 5 years for my business and my brand as a whole, like it's just about experimenting and then leaning in and just believing that whatever I fail in, I'll learn from it and keep going. And that's kind of where this whole journey's taken me.
There is so much to unpack here, but I want to talk a bit more about the ADHD and you getting diagnosed, because I feel like it's a very important piece of the puzzle. And you're very passionate about neurodiversity, and you had a project called Shades of ADHD. So could you just help me understand how this project reframe your understanding of ADHD from something that's to be scared of to a superpower that you should embrace and celebrate, because this is something that makes you different and you can utilize this to be a unique.
Yeah. So I think for me, I would argue it's the most profound day of my life, other than when my 3 daughters were born. And I remember the clothes I was wearing. I know where I parked my vehicle, and when I was being diagnosed ADHD at 31, it was like an aha moment of feeling like, oh my goodness, like someone sees me and I'm not broken. But I will tell you that journey initially was really hard, right? You go through a lot of things. You're like, how did people not see it earlier? And I'm on the high end of the spectrum from ADHD. Part of it was like people always looked at me as successful. And so me being ADHD was like, oh no, those that are ADHD, they're going to struggle on these things. But little did they know, I was just really good at masking it, right? I was very good at finding workarounds or ways to go through it. And so for me, like the ADHD part, it's the thing I'm most passionate about now. It's the thing that drives. I'm very open about it. And the reason that was when I got diagnosed, it was a great thing for. And remember, this was 12 years ago, 13 years ago. So that was also like really early, and like no one was really talking about it, and I wasn't talking about it early on either because I felt like I was seen and I had a new perspective, but I didn't really understand how to like lean into it as a superpower. But I actually on stage, I was a keynote speaker for 10 years. That was a big part of my life. And I was giving a talk about technology. So it's probably some boring talk about, technology or blockchain or something. And during Q&A, someone asked me a question, and they had just saw me on Instagram talking about ADHD. And they said something like, hey, you're that confident, you show up like you are as a speaker, you're into tech, and you do that as ADHD. And I just gave a normal answer like, yes, I'm ADHD, I was diagnosed, I'm medicated, I was very like open. And then I had a mom on the side of the stage, and I had like the line of people afterwards that were coming to talk to me. And one of the moms had her son on FaceTime. And she said, hey, do you mind if you say something to my son? And I was like, oh, what? And she's like, he's on the spectrum, he has autism, and he hasn't left his bedroom in a week. And he's really been struggling because his friends don't see him. And it was really interesting, right? I had people around me. And so I just grabbed the phone and I just, hey, what's up? And he just said it. He's like, my mom said you have ADHD and you're a speaker. And like, how do you do that? Like, what does that look like? And so we had a really great conversation. But the essence of it was, I told him, I was like, part of it is just showing up and realizing that the world wasn't built for us, but we can't make that like an excuse to not like kind of be who we are. And so I told him, I made a commitment to him. And this was, I think, 2015. It might have been 2014. I said, like, if you start owning your own side and stepping out there, I told him, I promise every interview I do, every stage I do, every introduction I do, I will include ADHD in there so that I can help, kind of drive that conversation forward. And I have right now, 10 years later, every interview, every conversation, ADHD is integrated in it. And I think part of that for me, and you mentioned the superpower aspect, was I think it goes on the whole piece of it, right? Like ADHD impacts every part of my life. And some of it is a superpower, but some of it is a grind and very difficult. And and some of the little things that most people look at as normal, let's say like brushing your teeth or taking a shower. We do that every day. We've been doing it our whole life. For me, that is something I have to convince myself every single day to do. And so I try to explain that to people that like something that just comes normal, and for me, I just thought that everyone struggled with that, right? And it wasn't that I don't want to be clean or I don't want to have a good hygiene, but the task itself just becomes overwhelming. Where like I will sit there, and I was doing it this morning. This is very real. I was sitting here this morning, and I was like, well, I had this interview and I had this call that I had, and I was like, man, do I really need a shower now? And like you go through this like internal dialogue because that task doesn't look like it does to everybody else. And so I use that as an example. And so I'm very open and transparent about it. Also being open about being medicated, because I think we can remove some of that shame and some of that guilt that comes around it. And I think for anyone that's out there, right? I don't think anyone is perfect. I think we all have our struggles, and it's not like one side or the other. But if I can help people feel like they're seen or heard, or I can help them be someone that's representative of ADHD, then I can. And you mentioned the Shades of ADHD project. That was a AI art piece that I leaned into and I minted as NFTs. And what I decided to do was, like, I'm not an artist. I'm like artistically challenged. But AI art allowed me to tell my story and put that into prompts. And then I could visualize what was going on in my ADHD brain. And I started to share it to Twitter and to my following, and people were like, I want to buy these. I want to, this, you finally captured visually what was going on in my head. And so I put out the collection. It sold out within the first hour. And I was blown away, right? As someone that's not artistic. And so it's just another example too of like, embracing tech, doing it your way, and not being afraid to fail, which is kind of the secret of success of my background. It kind of all worked kind of nicely in that way.
And the example that you gave is really good, of this kid that wanted to talk to you because that was very important for him and his mom. And there is something that you often tweet, and I'm quoting here: people connect with people, not logos. And I feel like you're breathing and living this every single day, and you help brands understand it and implement this philosophy. Could you just tell me a bit more about when did you realize this? Because I feel like we all know it on like this subconscious level, but when did you understand it and made it your mantra?
So for me, I mean, I remember it very well. I talk about it a little bit on stage as stories. But for me, I was struggling early on in social media, right? As Facebook came out, Twitter, I was one of the first, in that first year using Twitter, I would spend so much time trying to portray what I thought others wanted to see or wanted to hear from me. And I would take all this time to create a Facebook post and all these things. And it was actually my mom. I always give love to my mom in this. And she called me out and she was like, Brian, she was like, are you showing up online the same way that you show up offline? Because she said, you're loud, you're passionate, you wear colors and clothing that you don't care what people think. You're not afraid to be, not perfect. And of course I told my mom, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know social media. But then I hung up with her and I remember that day being like, you know what? The secret for me is going to be myself on both realms, right? Digital and offline. And that sounds simple and we can all hear it. We've probably all heard that. But that's a scary proposition, right? Because you're being transparent and open doesn't guarantee people are going to trust you. It just gives people a window into who you are. And so for me, that was kind of like that early on. Like I was like, I'm going to show up that way. And then I started to get success, right? I started to get speaking gigs because people connected with me as a girl dad, not because of what I did on stage. And then once they connected with me as a girl dad, they were like, oh, you're a speaker. My company's hiring. And they would, pay me $15,000 for a gig. And people would say, Brian, what's your secret? And I was like, I just showed up and talked about who I was online. And I started to get those opportunities. And I feel like where we're at right now, especially, right? If you look at the AI world we're living in, the digital world, I don't think we have to own the fact that it's not about adding more technology or more digital to our world. I still believe we live in kind of like a 50-50 split, right? 50% of our life and world is connected to a device or technology. 50% of it is offline and interaction. And I think we have to respect and prioritize both of them. And we also have to recognize that how we show up and how we leverage them is so important. And like one of my favorite taglines is like, if you're showing up as yourself online, the very first time that you meet somebody, they're not going to want to give you a handshake. They're going to give you a hug. And what I mean by that is they feel like they know you. And for me, like, I don't like small talk. That's part of my ADHD as well. And I felt like the more I put myself out there, more I talked about things, the more those connections were made. And you brought that up earlier. And I think in the Web3 crypto world especially, right, it's a lot of people are anonymous, right, which is a new variable that we've never had to deal with before. Like people are hiding behind a monkey photo or an alias. But I think that actually gives people another way to show up. And I used to joke, like, if you are a good person doing good things offline, you should show up as that same person. Now, if you suck or you're a bad person offline, maybe you should be a different person online. You should maybe use that anon and show up differently. But I think that's part of it for me. It's like there is like this, it's not about one is going to take over the other, but it's finding a way to show up as your whole self on both.
I'm really interested to know what's something that people get totally wrong when they first meet you in person and they assume based on your online personality.
So I think the one that probably shocks people the most is like, if you sit next to me on an airplane, like I don't like forced conversation or like that like awkward like piece. I get like anxiety from it. And so like people sit next to me on an airplane, they will have no idea that I'm a public speaker and I'm loud and I talk on stages around the world and I have this social media following. So that's one that always jumps out at people. And then like, but if they like break the ice or we have like a conversation or there's a drink spilled and we help clean it up, and I'll talk to their ear off for the entire flight, right? So like that's always like a weird a complex of it. But and then I think the piece that people I think maybe are most surprised about is like, for me, like showing up with my ADHD is not just something I do online to make an impact or tell a story. Like it's integrated into my life. And like, so even when we're sitting at a dinner table and something happens, or if the waitress comes up and says, oh, sorry, I forgot that, we're all a little bit ADHD. I'll actually tell her like, hey, just a heads up, like when you say that, it actually diminishes us that have ADHD. And I know you didn't mean it that way. And I try to just kind of break that silence and kind of figure out how to help people. And I think for some people, they're like, I thought you were just doing that online. Like, and like for me, that's a big piece of like, how can I make the same impact on small circles at dinner tables or small interactions as I do offline? So that's probably one of the ones that I think surprises people.
Can you tell me a bit more about your partner and how she or he, I'm not sure about your sexuality, apologies for it, deal with this? Because I think it's an integral part of who you are, but it also has an impact on their life. and they most likely should be aware of all the challenges that you face, and I'm sure that you have had long conversations with them and educated them. But could you tell me a bit more about the early phase of your relationship, like this dating period, but also how do they deal with it now?
Yeah. So I was married for 13 years, got married early, and that's the mother of my kids. And that a lot of that was I wasn't a great communicator. I couldn't figure out how to communicate what was going on in my head. She's a school teacher, so she showed up differently online, of course, because she had to worry about kids tracking her down. Like, so we had a very complex there. But I think a lot of lessons I learned from that, going through the divorce, was also just realizing that, like, I have to be better at talking about my emotions and I'm going through it. And the truth is, I haven't figured it out yet. Like, I'm currently single. I've been very blessed to have a couple long-term relationships over the last couple years, and I'm still very friendly and connected with them. And a lot of that lessons for me was just like, the more I can open up and I can explain things, right? Like little things like, for me, taking out the trash. When you walk by the trash can and you didn't take it out, they assume that you didn't care or value their opinion. But the truth is, like, my brain just stacks tasks on one plane. And that idea of taking the trash just got knocked off the back of the plane because I added a new task to it, versus someone else that's like, okay, I knew I have to remember that, right? And so, like, early on, I would just say, like, hey, if I forget the trash, don't, like, give me crap about it. And that's like a very weird, like, that's not a way to build a relationship, especially like in a dating and an environment. And so what I've learned is, like, I have to help them meet me halfway, not try to get them to meet me all the way on my department, right? And that's like my big soapbox right now, where ADHD is, like, especially ADHD, even the technology side of the house, AI. Like, to me, it's not about convincing someone that they have to do things my way, but it's like, hey, here's why I do things. Here's how they work for me. I know this is how you work. Let's figure out in the middle what works best for us, right? And it's little things. Like, I also know that, like, if something comes across via text message, I am more the way I communicate back is more direct and more open. Like, for what I don't have that emotional piece, and it might be opposite of what a normal typical or normie person might feel. And so I would tell, like, my partners now, I'll say something like, hey, if there's something that you want me to just get back to in, like, the true tone, even if we're in the same house, text me, and you'll get a different response than if you come up and confront me, because maybe that, like, the way that you're presenting it to me actually has me, like, on defense, and you didn't mean that, right? And so, like, that's where it is for me. And, like, even dating, right? Like, I actually wrote a blog post on this yesterday that I haven't posted yet, but, like, for me, like, how I show up dating and, like, how I'm openly trusting and I'm very forward with who I am, and those of us that are ADHD, we are oversharers. And that can scare a lot of people off because it can be overwhelming, it can be a lot there. And so I've had to learn, like, how to gradually let people in and figure it out. But the beauty for me is just realizing that, like, it's a constant evolution. And, like, the aha probably was, if I'm trying to force them to live life like me and think like me, we're never going to win. And that middle piece of, like, let's meet in the middle on how this all works. And that's really been the best. And it's with my daughters as well, right? My daughters, they know my alarm goes off twice a day to take my Adderall. They'll even say, Daddy, alarm's going off, take your medication. My middle daughter is diagnosed ADHD. And so we are very open. And I will tell them, hey, if you're seeing Daddy, get stuck in his head, or I'm not prioritizing you, you have to remember, like, that it's not because of you, it's because of how I'm thinking, and you're okay to nudge me. We have a thing where I'm like, you can always poke me. Like, I don't like being forced to do things, but you can poke me or remind me to do things. And so being very open with my daughters and how that works in my brain, works. It's just another one of those, kind of paths that we kind of, the more transparent you can be, I can really say, like, transparency has been my secret weapon everywhere. And it doesn't always work, because then people are like, wait, I don't like you because you're so transparent. I know. But at least they know that quicker, right? I don't have to be delayed on that side as well.
I would like to ask a question that's very honest and I've been struggling with lately. And it's working with people that have ADHD and they use it as an excuse. And they will always like me to meet them on their end, and they'll be like, oh my days, but I have ADHD, so you should be doing all these tedious tasks. And I always say that I don't mind doing them, but if I have to always do them, then it's unfair. How do you think that people without ADHD should deal with it? And I know that everyone is different, But what do you think is the most effective approach to communicate that I understand and I support you, but there must be a line that should not be crossed, and I'm more than happy to even walk the 60%, but you should walk your 40%.
Right. So I think the truth is it can easily become a crutch. And those of us that have ADHD, we have to own the fact that sometimes we will use it as a crutch, as an excuse for something that we were lacking. But I think for those that, like yourself, right, from the neurotypical view, I think part of it is just validating that ADHD is real. Like you'd be amazed just how something like as little just being like, hey, I understand, like your world's different. And then asking questions, being like, hey, I know that that task is different. How could I present it to you in a way that would benefit you? Or what are your optimal ways of working, right? And I think some people with ADHD are going to continue to push back because they don't want to do it, right? They're using this to prevent, and like, let's face it, like those are the people that you probably didn't want to work with to begin with, that if they're not willing to like adapt. But I think if you validate that what they're feeling or what they're going through, and you don't need to be like, do you have a diagnosis? You go to a doctor, right? Like whatever it may be and what they're feeling, validating it, but then being like, hey, let's figure out ways to work together with this, and let's willing to try, trial and error, right? Like, okay, rather than, I know that you struggle getting back to me on email and you don't like doing the mundane tasks, but what if I provided you it in audio form and I sent you a voice note? Would that help you? And you'd be amazed, because even if the voice note isn't what they want, they'd be like, well, actually, I do consume best watching YouTube videos. So if you videoed instructions for me, I might actually receive them better. And like, so something little as that like is a bridge, and then always checking in, right? Like I think and it's on both, right? ADHD or neurotypical and neurodiverse, and being like, hey, are we continuing, like how can we continue to improve our workflow or improve our interactions? I think that to me is like the secret weapon there. And like I said, there are like the excuses are going to exist, especially once you're diagnosed. And like the other piece of this I think is important is like, I'm medicated, been medicated for 13 years. It doesn't solve anything for me in my ADHD. It just allows me to better understand where my ADHD is showing up. Right? So most people will say like, oh, ADHD is an attention problem. It's not that we have an attention deficit. We actually have a hyper focus problem where we often will focus on too many things and we like to have all the things going on. Medication actually helps me be able to like, okay, where am I getting the dopamine from? How do I show up? And so those are little things that I would throw out there. The last one I would say is we with ADHD are very reward driven, because we lack dopamine, which is that thing that drives us for success. So for you, showing up is like, hey, I look in the mirror and I want to be the best person I can be, and I'm going to do my work and I'm going to accomplish things, right? And that's a superpower for those that are neurotypical. For us, we're gonna do the things that get us the most excited, the most reward, the most dopamine. And so like asking like, hey, what are ways that I can reward you for the things that you're doing so that you feel it? And it can be something as simple as like sending an email saying, dude, I really appreciate you doing that. Or someone could say, hey, if I accomplish all my tasks, maybe I'll take Friday off. Like for my team, as I grew my team, that was one of the things, like I had two people that were very ADHD in my team, and we worked really hard on incentives. And like one of the things that I joke on that my team knows is like, I love Chipotle. It's like my go-to. And what I do is if it's a day where I have hard things to accomplish, I will write down on a sticky note. I got sticky notes right here on my desk, right? Like I'll write down on sticky notes and I'll say, these 3 things need to be accomplished if I want to go to Chipotle. And what I do is I give myself the permission. Now, it's not saying every time that I accomplish it, but it's me working with my own brain, my own self, to realize I almost have to trick myself in a way to find that dopamine. And so as a manager or someone working with someone, you can be like, hey, if you can help me with this and let's work through this. The next task, I'll take the front end, I'll take those painful calls, and I'll only bring you in at the end. So that'll be the reward for us working this way. You'll be amazed where it goes from like ADHD overwhelm to ADHD hyper focus, because they now see something that would be rewarded for what they're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all these different approaches. And I definitely think that it shouldn't be used as an excuse. And I think that you bring something different, like neurodiverse people bring something different to the table, and we should enable people to be their true self. But I also want to talk a bit more about your brand and how you've built it around who you actually are. And something that you have posted a lot about is that it's more important to build a community than focusing on vanity metrics. And my partner and I are having a comms agency, and whenever we sign a new client, they always want to know what the deliverables are, and they'll be outlined in the contract, and we're more than happy to include them. But halfway through, we might realize that the deliverables are not exactly what they needed, or they might want to do a tiny change or whatever. We need to adjust the comms strategy. So can you tell me a bit more about this? And A, why this is important? And B, how do you implement it, especially when you talk to new clients that don't really know you? Because it's like deliverables are important for them, but it's kind of a vanity metric.
Right. So I think I'm actually like I think vanity metrics in some ways are essential in just defining especially if it's social media or digital comms, right? Because people have to wrap their head around. But I always say in any relationship, any partnership, and even with new clients, you must define success together out of the gate at the very beginning. And defining success isn't about like some number of views, but rather like how could you both look at what you're working on and say this was a success. And I think if you start there, then you can back into some of those metrics that are tangible, that you can say, okay, for us to make sure that we're on that path, let's check in every month and let's see what our SEO is. Let's see what our follower count is. Let's see what our email subscribers are. And then let's evolve that on what our next month's numbers should be, as long as we're still working towards that defined success. I would argue that one of the biggest problems that we have in this kind of environment is if you don't define what success looks like, how are you going to map something to some success piece of it? And I've been there. I grew up an agency, right? Influencer agency doing the speaking business. And early on, I was like, yeah, we're going to, we're going to get you this many impressions, this many followers. We're going to do all these things. And then of course that I was out of my control. And then I'd be like, well, for me to accomplish that, I need to go buy followers. And that's against everything in my being. Why am I doing this wrong? Right. And instead coming back and saying, hey, is your goal to expand your brand? Is your goal to help you reach more people or the right people? Is your goal to be a thought leader in the space and define that? Okay, that's the success looks like. Now let's look at it from a smaller increment and say, okay, the next 30 days, what are the things we're going to do to try to make that happen? Then let's reset along the way. And that's been like the magic for me, is like just that idea. But you have to start with that big picture, and you both have to kind of like not only agree on it, but it has to be something that you kind of write down and capture. And it's like, hey, for us, success is here. Because the other piece of this is that we don't celebrate success enough along the way with our clients. And we often will dwell. We have an hour call with our client every week, right? We spend 40 minutes on the things we need to do and the problems that arose. We spend 10 minutes on the things that were good and probably 10 minutes on the things we need to do in the future. And that's a very difficult thing, because then they'll come back and be like, well, what do we do successful? And so I have another, like, it's a funny tagline, but it helps people remember. I always say screenshot awesomeness. And what that means, and it's in my life, it's in my business, every time something good happens, every time an email from a client comes in and they say, we really appreciate this work. Yes, you could be like, okay, I was excited for it. I want you to screenshot it and put it into a folder on your desktop. And then what you can do is every month, at the end of the month, you can be like, you know what? Did we do anything that was great for our clients today? You can open up that folder, because we will remember the bad things, right? Those things will never get off of our head. But it's those little things, and you'd be amazed. Like since 2011, when I started kind of like implement, I have every screenshot in folders, not monthly organized because I'm ADHD, but like for each year, I have them all backed up. And I have screenshots of every good thing, every bad, even with my daughters. Like if my daughter says something to me, she comes over and says, Dad, I really appreciate you helping me on this. I'll take a picture with her and I'll add it to the folder, and I'll just write the caption to be like, hey, my daughter really appreciated me, because I got teenage daughters. So right now there's days where they don't really want daddy, and I drop them off on the side of the school because they're like, I don't even want to be associated with you. And that could be a lot, right? You're like, oh, I'm a bad dad. But then I open that folder and I'm like, actually, my kids love me, and that's just life. And so that's like probably the one that I think, and it can be implemented with your partner, it can be implemented with your clients, like especially in digital. We are really bad at screenshotting wins along the way to prove to people that we're working. And I remember my clients coming to me and being like, "What the hell have you done?" And I'd be like, "Dude, we've worked so hard and we have so many wins, but like I couldn't even remember them. Like, it was just driving me crazy." And then when we implemented this screenshotting piece, and like we would even do like on Slack, we would have one group, and everybody dropped in. Every time a client said something good, every single time someone replied to a tweet, no matter how small, if it felt like it was a positive win for you, dropped it in there. And now you can even run AI against the folder and say, "Hey, summarize everything that was in those pictures that are in that folder," and you could get an output of all of those screenshots. And so to me, it's one of those things that's probably been one of my secret weapons, mental health wise, my business wise, was like really capturing those things and creating that screenshot of awesomeness.
You've mentioned your daughters on multiple occasions, and I would love to learn what are some of the lessons that you've learned as a father that you've implemented in your business and you would like to share with us.
Yeah. So yeah, being a girl dad is, my dreams come true. Is my greatest job. And I was the kid at 14 when my guidance
I
counselor.
always wanted to have daughters. Sorry to interrupt, by the way.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah,
Oh,
so I
wow.
have three daughters, but I'm also the oldest of three boys. So my mom actually has six granddaughters after raising three boys. So like it's a very interesting world. And I will say, I always thought I wanted a boy. Then after having two daughters, I prayed that my third one would be a girl. Like I was so like I started to understand girls, and I will just say I'm biased now, but like we went to the amusement park last weekend with my daughters, and having daughters, oh my goodness, it's like so much nicer, so much connect. Like, and maybe it's because my dad too, but like watching boys and the craziness and knowing how I showed up, like my poor mom, I say that a lot. But like I was 14 and my guidance counselor asked what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I said be a dad, and he was like, I've never heard a guy say that as that answer. And I was like, why? Like my dad's really great and I want to be a dad. Like I love kids. That always rang true for me. And I'll say like part of the journey as a dad was, I had all three of my daughters with my ex-wife going through a divorce and like learning how to like show up for them, but also, deal with the world that I'm living in. And so there's a lot of those lessons like in business, right? Like things are going to come up and you're going to have to compartmentalize, but you're also just going to have to realize that like maybe the dream that you had, how you pictured it, and this is probably the biggest one for me, the dream that I pictured or the way that I want my business to go, I can almost guarantee you it's not going to go that way. And that's how it's been for me as a dad, right? But my picture of a dad wasn't co-parenting. It was always and it was so tough early on. But now I've learned to be like, okay, this is actually the best for my life, the best for my daughter's life, and I can't really change it, right? So I'm gonna have to evolve on that. And I also think like one of the other parts are we often make things complicated in business because we believe that's what makes us valuable. And Steve Jobs said it, and I'm a big Steve Jobs fan. I mean, even my shirt, right? This is I'm an Apple fanboy, Steve Jobs guy, and he would often say like things like the concept of like, the dots are going to only connect when you're looking backwards. They don't connect when you're looking forward. And he would also say things like, just about like just your general approach on life, on like how you show up. And so like for me as a dad, and like talking to my daughters, Steve Jobs highlighted and said, the greatest innovators know how to simplify technology, not make it more complex. And when you're interacting with your daughter, like when I talk to my daughters about AI right now, right? Like I do a lot of AI, a lot of meme coin, and a lot of crypto. I'll explain to them something, and they'll be like, "That makes no sense. That's dumb. Why are you doing that? What is that frog meme coin that you spent money on, and what does that do?" And then I have to break it down to them. And what I realize is, by the end of it, I've simplified it in a way that I probably should just be using that on my website and have it everywhere else. But instead, I go into this, and so like I feel like there is something to be said about like understanding that like the way that like being a father and owning like my kids look at life differently, and I should respect that. And it's kind of wild, but like I would argue that part of the things that I've done great in my business were because my daughters taught me things about me and about the way I should do things. And so like if you're willing to learn from people that are above you, people that are your side, your competitors, but also people that would be quote unquote below you, right? People that are younger than you in your business, people that are your kids, even other kids, it can really be a big unlock. I think for me, looking at business and life, like find those ways and you can kind of make it all work. And so, yeah, it's a wild ride being a dad. There's nothing I would trade for it in the world. I think it's the greatest gift that I have. And it's not always perfect just because I like business. But there is something beautiful about the idea of like, I learn just as much from my kids as I hope that I help them learn.
And you mentioned your business on multiple occasions. Could you please tell me a bit more about it? Because I know that you have your own brand and underneath it, you have multiple verticals. But can you just double down on this?
Yeah. So it's been, I've been an entrepreneur, now 11 years. And it kind of always evolving in like kind of like the business and the brand. For me, like speaking, of course, has been a big key part of the brand, right? Going around the world, speaking at public stages. But of course, COVID threw a big wrench in that in the speaking business, right? All of a sudden, all events closed down. It not only took a while for people to get events back up, but now they're prioritizing best-selling authors or people that have been CEOs of companies. And so I've always been evolving. And so for me, I've always had like kind of a advising consulting side of the business and the brand. And then I've had the content creator side, right? As myself, right? I've hosted 9 podcasts over the years. Some of them sponsored, some of them I created for a long while. And then I got sponsors. Some of them were never sponsors, but they were my lead generation magnet, right? Like where I didn't have to give a call to action, but someone could listen to me and then we could deliver, right? I think I've been on, I don't remember my speaker agent I think I've been on well over 400 podcasts as a guest, right? So there's a lot, like if you just search my name in app, iTunes or in Spotify. So like using like that kind of content has always been great for like kind of the growth of my brand, but also evolving, right? Like right now I'm, advising on tokenomics for a startup that has an accelerator that's doing great things. I'm an advisor on 2 meme coin projects that not only am I advising, but I'm taking the community lead perspective, and I run a weekly Twitter space. And for me, like, it's not often about like direct monetization. It's like, okay, how can I kind of figure this out? Because when someone told me you should have multiple sources of revenue, that really overwhelmed me, because I was like, wait, I'm struggling just to manage one of them. Now, you want me to have all this passive revenue? And like, they always make that sound way easier and nicer than it really is. For me, it's about how can I connect the dots, and like, not only in my overall brand, but am I willing to evolve? Like right now, I'm actually going through a part where we're relaunching the speaking business. I still have, my content and the advising piece of it. And I'm even asking myself, do I even want to be the CEO of my company anymore? Like I'm looking at it and saying, what if I was able to let someone come in and take on the role that I've had for the last 11 years, and I could actually just show up and do the things that I believe I'm the most valuable? And so I'm going through that process at the moment. I'm integrating AI into my business a lot, so I'm able to create more content. I have a new show that's going to be coming out, which will be a podcast that is AI kind of generated, and it's taking my thoughts and my lessons, and using my voice. But I'm gonna be able to put out daily content without it being a daily kind of pain of mine. I mean, I did a daily podcast about NFTs every single day for a year, and I bought an NFT every day for a year. And so when here's a good one for you. If someone with ADHD says they can't be consistent, or they struggle with showing up all the time, you can say, hey, there's a guy it's called NFT 365. He did a podcast every day for a year. And the reason I did that is I wanted to prove myself that I could, right? And it's not to say those with ADHD don't struggle to be consistent, because I do, but it's not saying that it's impossible. And so that's where kind of like my business has kind of been evolving in that. And I'm not afraid to admit, like, I also realize that like I can be great as an entrepreneur, great as a creator, and great as a speaker, but also not be a great business person at scaling or hiring the right people or partnering with the right people. And a lot of that is just kind of learning, kind of as you go.
What's the most unexpected emotional moment during these 365 days? I read a bit about it. I've listened to a few of the podcasts. It's really interesting. But yeah, just what was... Actually, can I change the question a bit? What was the happiest moment?
Yeah, sure.
And the one that's like unexpected and the saddest moment?
So, for me, pushing it live, like, because I'm very impulsive, like my Drew and I, my business partner and I, we were on a train back from NFT NYC on a Friday, and we said, there's not a daily podcast in this space. And this was November of 2021, right before the boom, right? These are things we're taking off, like new NFT projects. And I said we should launch it Monday. It's 11/11/21. I like the date. It's 11/11. And we literally came up with the idea on Friday. We launched it on Monday on this crazy idea of doing it every day. Now, I'd hosted a bunch of podcasts prior. None of them were daily. And the truth is, I always had a caveat and tell people, I'm not even sure what day of the week this will be on, but I promise it'll be weekly. Like that's how much I struggled at, right? So like I threw this out there to the world. Well, quickly it gained traction, not only because it was daily, but it was also because I was being truthful and like honest about like the NFT space. I was also buying an NFT every day that was freshly minted. So I had to do the research, and I would share like kind of the philosophy and that piece of it. And I'll say quickly, in the first 90 days, it exceeded in downloads. If I took all of the downloads of my first eight podcasts, in 90 days, I beat that in this first podcast. And it was wild for me, right? It was like this overwhelming. I hit 1 million downloads, and I got like the Spotify email, and I remember being like, this isn't the one I expected it to do it. And interestingly, that actually wasn't the happiest moment or the thing that I like looked back on. It was the elements of people being like, hey, you helped me see something, or you helped me understand something. And one of the moments was, March 22nd of 2022. So we're a couple months in. Our podcast is as big as it's ever been. We got sponsors. I could pretty much get any guest that I want. And I have a background in cybersecurity. And my wallet got hacked. Or truthfully, my daughters were playing Roblox on my computer. I had to buy something really quick. I minimized Roblox. I went to buy an NFT, and I didn't do what I tell everybody else to do. And I just clicked the pop-up, put the Roblox back on, went into my other room. And all of a sudden I started getting notifications, and people were like, Fanzo, you're selling? And I'm like, I'm not selling it. Like, I'm holding every one of these NFTs. And I came back, and all of a sudden my wallet's getting drained, right? Nine ETH worth of NFTs immediately, and there was nothing I could do. And it was the most violating experience that I had had digitally, where I felt like someone had really, like, it hurt me I had always felt empathy for those that had had their wallet hacked. But it wasn't until I felt it that I realized how much of a violation it felt to me. And then I also realized, like, what am I going to do? And I'll tell you, like, as soon as I realized it, because I'm a content creator, I jumped on my computer and I hit screen record. And I recorded my camera and my screen as I'm triaging it and going through it. And so I'm emotional. I'm going through all these things, trying to mitigate it. I got people trying to help me out. And part of that was like, I wanted to put it out to the world and then be like, hey, this is real and raw. And I had a decision to make, right? Like, someone that proudly worked in cybersecurity, a lot of my podcasts, I would tell people, don't click on links. Make sure that what you're doing, use your ledger. I would give all that advice. And so I decided that to own it that next day. And I put out that video of me raw and real. And I put up a whole podcast episode, and I got emotional, started tearing up and crying on the episode. And I just explained it. And I'll say the community was amazing. Almost every project from the NFTs that I got stolen, because they were for the collection, right? For the podcast. Almost every one, but like 2. And so I think it was like 41 NFTs that got stolen at the time, worth, $25,000 or $35,000 at the time. They donated ones, the project donated ones back into the community, right? So like that warmth and that feeling of like, hey, I was putting in the work, and the teams were reaching out to me. But then even a bigger piece of it was the amount of time since that day, right? March 22nd, 2022. We're now in 2025. I still have people that will come up to me and say, Fanzo, you have no idea how much that helped me. I could never tell my wife or my friends that I got my wallet hacked or I clicked the wrong link. But the fact that you admitted it and owned it, I didn't feel like I was an idiot or I was so dumb. And it made me feel like, okay, I can continue to operate in this space, and it's okay to recognize it. And so that's been my happiest moment. And like the weirdest way of like the podcast being successful was like my transparency and just putting it out there that, it got drained, and that's kind of how it happened. And it also was like a reminder that there are really good people in the Web3 crypto space. No matter how bad times might be, and bad people are always going to do bad things with technology. AI right now, people love to dwell on the bad side or the risks. The truth is, when they invented fire and they invented the wheel, both of those could be used badly, right? And like that's and it's sad, but it's the truth, right? Like when live video came out, people were like, "Oh my God, this is making people do bad things." It's like, no, live video just gave us access to the bad things people were already doing. And so I look at that for everything, right? From crypto to blockchain to AI. And if we allow the bad people doing bad things to prevent us from doing good things with technology, they win. And so that to me was a kind of a big lesson in the podcast, in the NFT 365, was I realized that, hey, there's good people in here, and I'm going to show up, because for anyone that remembers 2022, that spring comes, the summer starts, the market just takes a plummet. And I still have to show up every single day until November 11th, 2022. And that was a grind, right? Not only showing up the day after I got hacked, but then as everyone is selling, NFTs are falling apart, companies are closing down their thing, I still was showing up every day because I made that commitment to myself. And part of that showing up to me was proving it to myself in a way. And like our download numbers went down because of course people weren't in the NFT crypto space as much. But I stayed committed to that end goal, right? And that's a business lesson. It's kind of a life lesson. And for me, it just taught me a lot about my own self, right? Like, hey, if I commit something and I see that it's making a good impact, and I showed up every day knowing that if I had one listener and I impacted one person, that was going to be worth it for me. And that was wild coming from a podcast that I hit 1 million downloads so quickly. And so, yeah, a lot of great lessons in that for me. And it's something that I'm still very proud of.
And you mentioned meme coins. Could you just tell me a bit more about your thesis on memes? Do you think they're dead? I know the fart coin went up in the last 10 days, 12, 14 days actually. But it crashed down to probably less than $1 now. And then pretty much the same about SPX, Giga, and the rest of the meme coins. None of it's a financial advice, but what's your thesis and what are you betting on?
So I'm a big proponent of crypto as a whole. I believe it's an unlock for not only financial freedom, but it's an unlock for us to exchange and understand, like kind of level the playing field. And I'm even a bigger fan of the blockchain. I believe the blockchain itself, which is what crypto is built on, what NFTs are built on, it gives us a transparent layer on the proof of things that happen, right? So like for me, I can tell you, I created that Shades of ADHD collection and art. And someone could come to me and say, Brian, no, I created it first. Look at this screenshot I can have. And what I can tell them is, no, I can give you proof on an immutable blockchain that says the date and the time and where the wallet and the hash that it came on when I created this. So if you imagine that for things like IP or brand properties or people stealing things, the blockchain, in my opinion, is the vehicle for transparency of technology, and AI is why crypto AI is a big piece of this. But the piece of it that tie it back to meme coins and is like, I think I believe, and I think you've kind of even hinted this, making friends as an adult is difficult. Finding your people online in 2025 is crazy. Right? Like I feel blessed. Like I Facebook and MySpace in college, right after college. Like I only had 2 choices. Now we have thousands of apps, thousands of forums, thousands of places. And so we become very disconnected. But we also, unfortunately, when we're online, we don't do a great job of allowing people to even know what communities we're a part of, right? When you're part of a church, you almost like it's part of your identity. When you, like, I'm a Jeep guy, right? I own a Jeep, so my Jeep is sitting out. People know that I own a Jeep, right? If I'm a Pittsburgh sports fan, I wear my Pittsburgh Steelers stuff. But like when you show up online, how do you identify with your community, and how do you allow that to kind of be part of that, like that brand and your association? And so that's where I look at meme coins, right? I look at meme coins as kind of like a digital identity and allowing you to connect. And I will say, like, my most valuable business partner, the person that I'm working with the most right now, the person that has unlocked the most doors for me, happened because I got into a meme coin. And I got into a meme coin, started connecting with people and said, hey, you know what? We need someone to do some more audio and some content. I'm going to jump on and do it because I feel like it could benefit the community. This person reached out and was like, oh my God, I love what you're doing. We started to connect. We had mutual people that were associated. And all of a sudden we started doing work together. We started doing business together. I hung out at his house and met his daughter this past weekend. And that was all because of a meme coin. And so like, and I don't think it's about like financial advice. And yes, you know, anything that has a market, right? Price goes up, price go down. But like the truth of the matter is it's less about meme coin prices right now. And it's more about Bitcoin and the total market, right? Like November of this past year, so it's not very long ago. I mean, meme coins were taking off, the market was taking off, but the entire global market was taking off, right? Then we entered a war, a change in politicians here in the United States. We have tariffs, we have other things going on in the world that, you know, that are kind of impacting it. And so I don't look at meme coins as like the easy button of the solve, but I do look at like things like Bitcoin being the, like, in my opinion, the best store of value of what you can invest in right now, right? I believe not only is it going to continue to go up, but it's universal value. I mean, the United States is using it. I think there's now 27 countries that are using it as their, you know, strategic investment, and Bitcoin being kind of that proof of that value on the blockchain. But, you know, I'm active in GameStop, GME on Ethereum, which is one of my favorite ones, right? Anyone that remembers the GameStop stock side of the house, you know, being a stock guy and a crypto guy, that one's, you know, I'm a big fan of. And then Pepe Coin and AI, right? There's like, I like projects that have utility because I'm a tech guy, right? So like, I'm in projects like GME that is just for the meme, but I'm also in meme coins that have utility, right? The Pepe coin one, they launched an interactive 3D gaming experience where you can go into this 3D world. They have an AI project that is launching a decentralized AI piece of it, and that I got able to invest in it and get rewards because of that. And so for me, meme coins are an unlock for digital connection. They're a way for me to show up and be my identity, like allow people to recognize it. But I also think it's kind of like an easy button for trying to find people that you want to get to know better, right? And as I mentioned, let's face it, I mean, our algorithms are crazy. Like I wish I could see people's content that I wanted to see on Instagram or Twitter. But what I do know is that the telegrams that I'm a part of with the meme coin community, I know to show up on Sunday nights, they're going to be active and engaged. We're going to have that great time. And yeah, we all found each other because some frog meme called Pepe, but truly we all continue to show up because we're getting to know each other better. So that's where that whole world comes into me. And I would tell you, like, don't sleep on the next wave. I believe in the next 3 to 4 months, we're going to have the next wave. We're going to have Bitcoin at an all-time high. And you mentioned Fartcoin. Like, I think Fartcoin is one of the ones that has an AI component of it and the story of it. I think that's one of those bets that we're going to see that take off in ways that you can't imagine. So don't invest, of course, when you're not willing to lose. And also, I always tell people, like, make your own decisions. You're an adult and take responsibility for your own decisions. Like, don't blame some influencer or some podcast that you listen to, but also don't let yourself be alienated or don't allow people that are either spreading rumors or negativity to not let you do the research yourself. Because I told you, I'm beyond glad because my business is more successful today, right now, than it's ever been, and a lot of it has to do with meme coins and being able to connect with those that are willing to invest and collaborate. So I have a lot to own on that side of the house.
If there's only one message that you can leave for the world, what would that be? And this will be my last question for you.
I love it. So the message is probably simple, and people that know me know it enough. It's called press the damn button. And press the damn button for me represents be willing to take action in everything in your life. Show up the best that you can. It's okay that you're pressing the damn button and you're only giving 5%. At least you're pressing the damn button. Tell your story. Put yourself out there. Try AI tools. The amount of time, like I firmly believe in the world we're in today, a lot of people like to listen to advice and try to learn. Some people put it into an action plan and want to try to implement it. Very few people take that action plan and actually start doing things. And even fewer continue to show up and press the damn button every single day. And I believe that's, like, to me, the magic weapon. It's not about online or offline. It's not about crypto or Instagram. To me, it's about how can I tell my story, make an impact. And the truth is action and pressing the damn button is that answer. And, for me, it's I had a podcast with that title. It's a keynote that I've given. It's a book that I'm finalizing right now that will be out on kind of pressing the damn button in this AI world. And it touches on ADHD. It touches on AI and that impact. And I'll tell you, like, just a weird segue on that is, like, right now, ChatGPT has been a lifeline for me. It's allowed me to better understand my ADHD, allowed me to better understand my business. I'm able to scale some things. Like, we're working on a couple of websites right now on, like, this launch plan, and I'm doing it. What took me 6 months is taking me 1 week. And I'm not saying that to, like, peddle AI, but, like, be willing to try these things out, because I've been using AI for a while, and it wasn't until, like, the last 3 months that all of a sudden it became so valuable that I'm paying $200 for, like, 4 different tools for a month, which is crazy. I would never think I would be doing that. But the amount is saving me in the way that I'm using it. But the funny part about it is, to tie this back, I wouldn't have been able to do this using AI this way if I hadn't started pressing the damn button when it first came out. And it wasn't working for me. It felt I got more information and more overwhelmed. I was like, AI is giving me more work. I don't want that. But I continue pressing the button, continue to innovate, continue to try it out. And right now, like, it's such a powerful thing. Even for, like, this podcast, right? Like, I knew there was a couple things I had to do. I plugged in a couple of things. I plugged in the podcast, and he said, give me a brief, maybe understand the style, the things that are going on. It gave me a great synopsis so that I could show up as my true self. And, like, something's pretty cool about that versus it probably would have taken me a couple of hours worth of research. So yeah, press the damn button is definitely the mantra.
I love this, and I want to give you the opportunity actually to tell us a bit more about the upcoming book if you want to, and promote it as much as you want. But also, where can we find you on socials? And I know that you're active on Twitter. but are you active on LinkedIn? And is this a platform that you're planning to use?
Yeah, oh yeah, LinkedIn's one. I mean, since 2014, I've posted once a week at least on LinkedIn every single week. Like I have a very blessed to have a large following there. I love LinkedIn. Twitter is probably without question the one I'm the most active on. I've always found value in Twitter. I really love Twitter. I know not everyone does. The algorithm takes work, it takes time, but I've really loved Twitter for that side. But I'm active on every channel: TikTok, Instagram. I have pretty much a following. My handle is the same on every channel, right? Because it's iSocialFanz, the letter I, social, and then FANZ. It's I because I'm an Apple fanboy, so iPhone, iPad, iSocial. I had created a bunch of accounts, and so it was my social one, and then every one of them had fans because my last name's Fanzo. I have been leaning in more, like my branding has a lot more just with my last name, Fanzo, mainly because in the Web3 space, it just became what people have always called me. And the book, funny enough, like I've talked about the book and wanted to bring it to life. I started actually writing it, or the piece of Press the Damn Button was actually originally brought to life in 2017 because there was one slide on a keynote and people kept using it, tweeting about it and saying, oh man, Fanzo inspired me to press the damn button. And I was like, I should create something on it. But the truth is my anxiety and my overwhelming about creating a book, because I have ADHD, so I don't read books. I listen to books. Writing a book became too much to me. It was overwhelming. I had a book publisher. I worked on a sponsor, and I started to write the book, and it became so much that it just wasn't coming to life. And then, interestingly enough, started using AI and pulled in my YouTube channel and pulled in all the stuff I wrote in my book. And all of a sudden, I said, "Hey, how can I co-create this with AI?" And wild enough, I went from 7 years of trying to bring this book to life to I now have 96 bursts formatted the way that I want to, all working with AI to co-create it. AI is not writing it for me, but it's helping me stay on track. We're building out the thesis. It wrote my book publisher emails and the things that I had to do for outreach. So there's no date on it yet, but it's going to have, has an AI component, it has a website component of it. And the truth is, pressing the damn button for me is my mantra. But the hardest thing it's ever been for me to press the damn button is my book. And so for others that are out there, just know like the medium or the message might not be your fit. Keep trying different ways. Because people are like, wait a second, Brian, you go on stages, you've had 9 podcasts. How the hell have you not created a book? And for whatever reason, that book became so much more than it probably should have. And thanks to AI, thanks to ChatGPT mostly, I've been able to kind of get over that hump and now bring it to life and now create it in the way that I want to. So there's no links or anything to promote on that. You can connect with me with whatever social channel you want to. If you're not a Twitter fan, connect with me on Instagram. If you're on TikTok, whatever it may be, I'm a creator just about everywhere. So I appreciate you having me on, and always great to connect with new people and be able to tell the story.
Thanks for sharing your story and being so honest and transparent in yourself on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us today, Brian.
Yep, thanks for having me. Cheers, everybody.